Today we're going to talk about common ground. What is it and why do we need it? Particularly in difficult conversations, which are abundant these days, right? It's hard to talk to each other. And how could we make progress talking about difficult things? This handout has four main pieces to it. First, reason. We'll talk about what it is and why it's necessary for common ground. Integrity, rational presuppositionalism, and the principle of clarity. Okay, these are the four pieces needed for common ground in difficult conversations, like ethics, like politics, like religion. All right, so let's talk about reason as a piece for common ground. And we'll start with this assumption. And I don't know if it's an assumption or if it's just self-evident. We think. And if you think about it, you're thinking, right? So it's self-evident that we think. We are thinkers. Humans are thinkers. And it is self-evident that there are laws of thought. Maybe we need to think about what those laws are. So when we talk about reason, we primarily mean reason the laws of thought. So we think, and there are laws of thinking. And we didn't make these laws up. So there are three laws. I would like you to know these. The first is the law of identity. The law of identity says A is A. A thing is what it is. Human is human. Dog is dog. Rock is rock. The second law is the law of non-contradiction. This one says that something cannot be both A and non-A in the same respect and at the same time. So something's not both a human and a non-human in the same respect and at the same time. It's not both dog and non-dog, rock and non-rock. Now you can think of objections. We'll have a discussion about reason where we can dig into this a little bit more. The third law is the law of excluded middle, which says something is either A or it is non-A. It is either human or non-human, dog or non-dog. Okay, so think about those laws. These laws are discovered by Aristotle, a philosopher. He's also the first to write an ethics textbook. He writes this in his metaphysics book. And he says these laws are the laws of thought and the laws of being. So they apply to the things that we think about. They apply to the world. What violates the laws of thought is meaningless. So it's meaningless in two ways. For example, if I say something like blicks are grew, you're going to say what? Because we don't know what those words mean. It's not quite a violation of the laws of thought, but we don't know what it means. We haven't applied identity to say blick is blick. We don't know what that is yet. But if I were to say something like blicks are non-blicks, we have a double problem now, right? We don't know what a blick is, and it appears that we're saying a contradiction. It is what it isn't. So things that violate the laws of thought become meaningless. And when things are meaningless, we can't think them. You can't think A is non-A. Being is non-being. Dog is non-dog. We're just using words without content. So we are going to have a commitment to reason the laws of thought in our conversations with one another. If someone says A is non-A, then they're contradicting themselves and we can't communicate any further. Unless a person is willing to change their mind, we can always do that. When we see a contradiction, you can say, oh, I should correct that. That's a contradiction. I should change my mind. And that's perfectly acceptable to change your mind. I do it all the time. All right, so reason is the first part of common ground for difficult conversations. The second piece is integrity. Think of this word integrity. Integer, wholeness, one, unity. Integrity assumes a commitment to reason. So it is assuming that you are a thinker and you're using the laws of thought and you're not violating the laws of thought. To violate the laws of thought, to have a contradiction and try to hold on to it would be a lack of integrity, because you're saying I'm a rational being and I'm not a rational being. I'm a rational being, I want to use reason, and I'm not using it right now. So integrity assumes a commitment to reason. Integrity is a concern for consistency between our thoughts, that we don't have contradictions in our thinking, and between our thoughts and our words, that we say what we mean and we mean what we say, and our deeds, we do what we say. So integrity is a deep issue for people. Lots of people don't recognize that they are lacking integrity. They say things that they don't mean. And they do things that go against what they say, and they think conflicting things. So integrity is needed for common ground. The opposite of integrity is hypocrisy, saying one thing and doing another. We are more or less conscious, aware, and consistent in our basic beliefs. So we may be aware of our basic beliefs. Usually our basic beliefs come out in the course of conversation, challenge, disagreements. When you say, I don't believe that, but when you say, I don't believe that, do you back up and say, what do I believe and why? So our basic beliefs are going to be our philosophical beliefs. We'll talk about that next. We should work to become more conscious and consistent in our basic beliefs. That's what mature people do. We become more aware of our own beliefs and more consistent in living them. We know what we believe and why we believe it, and we're able to articulate that to others and defend it in conversations. So if a person's not very conscious and consistent in their basic beliefs, it's going to be difficult to have conversations with them. Difficult conversations require consciousness of what you believe and consistency in what you believe, right? Now, how do we become conscious and consistent? Self-examination. We need to look inside ourselves and say, what do I really believe about this and why? So self-examination is necessary to have integrity. And this is a lifelong process, self-examination. This is what Socrates was advocating for when he said the unexamined life for humans is not worth living. Why? Because humans are thinkers, and we should think about our own views first. We're very good at going out and judging other people's views, and not very good at judging our own views first. So that's what self-examination is about. Before you go out there and pick apart everybody else's beliefs, establish your own. Figure out what you believe and why. That's integrity. Okay, we're building here. Now we're going to talk about rational presuppositionalism, which is a method for doing philosophy. Integrity requires critical thinking. Critical thinking, consistently applied, uses reason to test our own basic beliefs, what we were just talking about in self-examination. Critical thinking is where we go, what do I believe? What are my basic beliefs? Why do I think that? Do I have a good argument for that? We think of the less basic in light of the more basic. So this is the method. First things first, secondary things next. So think of like a staircase. There's the bottom of the stairs, and each step takes you a little bit higher until you get to the second landing, right? But you never jump from the bottom to the second landing directly. You have to take steps. Rational presuppositionalism is a way of taking steps in our thinking and in our conversations with other people. It's a step-by-step approach from more basic things to less basic things. So let's look at 3 applications. We'll do more as we go along in class, but let's look at 3 applications. There is an order in our thinking. Did you know that? There's an order in our thinking. First, reason. Reason applied, like A is A. And then meaning comes after reason. We say, what does that mean? You use this word, the good. What does that mean? And if we can both get the same meaning in our minds, seek agreement on the meaning of our terms, that's progress. Now we could take the next step to looking at judgments. Judgments are when I say something like, the good is knowledge. That's a judgment. It's either true or false. So the next level we're looking for is truth and knowledge of the truth. I mean, truth may be out there, but we don't know it. We want to know the truth. That's what philosophy is searching for. So in ethics class, we want knowledge of the good, not just my feelings about the good or my opinions about the good. We want knowledge. Okay, so meaning, reason, meaning, truth, and knowledge of the truth. And then when you have pieces that you know and you start connecting them into a whole system of truth, that's called understanding. When you go, I understand now. I see it. I see the big picture. And then when we have an understanding of how things work, big pictures work, then we can have wisdom. And wisdom is the highest level of thinking. It is knowing how to act, the best way to act. It has to do with knowing the ends and the best means of achieving the ends. So the good and the means to the good. So there's an order in our thinking. And if we don't have things in place early on, like we don't agree to the meaning of our terms, then we're not going to be able to get knowledge of the truth together. And we won't be able to understand together. And we won't be able to act wisely in unison together. So you can see there's an order to our thinking, and we need to maintain that order. If we don't, we won't come to agreement. There is an order in philosophy, the discipline. This is important for us, and this is where we can talk about the house I mentioned. So when I mentioned the house, I talked about the ground as the epistemology. So we're talking about common ground, a common way of knowing together. So we would like the ground to be similar, the same. And the ground level is how we answer the question, how do I know? Now I'm suggesting we know by reason, but that's been disputed in the history of philosophy. And so when we talk about the reason handout, we'll open that up a little bit more. So we have, all of us have that ground level assumption. How do we know things? It's our source of authority. And we'll talk more about that as we go along in the class. The next level, you build a foundation on the ground. This foundation is the foundation of your world and life view. It's your basic beliefs about what is eternal, what is real, what ultimate reality is like. Does God exist or not? What is a human being? Answers to those questions are often assumed by us. We don't always go, yeah, I've got an argument for the existence of God, and here it is. Or I've got an argument why God doesn't exist, and here it is. We usually assume these things, and that's why we need to do critical thinking, to examine our assumptions about our metaphysics, our answer to the question, what is real? So first, epistemology, because then we can see what's the method for knowing what is real. Second, metaphysics, and then we build a house, a world and life view on that foundation. And this house includes our view of the good life, what we think the good is. It includes all of our values, all of our attitudes. It branches into things like politics, how you practice your religion. You know, metaphysics is connected to religion. And it is the source of meaning in our life. Ethics. So epistemology, metaphysics, ethics. And you live in this house. All of your experiences come to you filtered through this house. Your philosophical assumptions, your world and life view. So there is an order in philosophy. Epistemology first, then metaphysics, then ethics. And we are talking primarily about ethics today. In that context, I'm including there is an order in our being here. Because when we are having difficult conversations with others, we need to keep in mind that we could be operating out of different aspects of our nature as human beings. So these are different levels of human nature. Humans are complex beings, but we share certain things in common. So we can talk about a unity and a diversity in human nature. The thing we all have in common is that we're equally human insofar as we're rational, political animals. That's what Aristotle says a human is. Now think about it. We've already talked about it. It's self-evident that we think. So we're rational. And political means we live in communities with other people. We're born into communities. I think that's pretty self-evident as well. You're born into a family. And if you don't have a family, someone else cares for you. Some other aspect of the community cares for you and raises you. And animal means we have sensations. We have a body. At least it appears we do, right? So rational political animals, we all have that in common. Things we don't have in common follow though. So here's the source of unity for humans. We are all human. And we have a whole discussion about human dignity coming up where we'll hash this out and the meaning of this. And we also have a whole discussion on presuppositions too. Everyone has a belief about what is eternal. Remember, we're more or less conscious of that belief, but it falls into two categories. Either everything is eternal, or only some things are eternal. And I'll have to give you an argument for that later and show you why that's the case. But we'll also see that ethics falls into these categories as well. Ethical theories that fall under all is eternal and ethical theories that fall under only some is eternal. We'll examine both. We disagree over this, and this is an area where we can work on seeking agreement. We don't have to just go, well, everybody disagrees on the level of metaphysics. We can say, no, that's somewhere we disagree, but we don't have to. If we had common ground, we can discuss those things and make progress. Okay, we have different personality types. You've probably taken a personality test somewhere in your life. And they fall out in terms of people who are more philosophically inclined, thinking, people who are more psychologically inclined, feeling, and people who are more practically inclined, doing. We'll talk more about this, but we disagree here, and we're different. But we don't have to disagree. We could work together and use our strengths. So these are different levels. First, we're human, then we have basic beliefs, then we have personality types, and then we have backgrounds, fourth level of human nature. And we differ here. We have so much difference here. We have different gender identities, different race, different ethnicity, social, economic background, geography differences. We come from all over the world, different parts of the world, and that goes into our background. We have different levels of education, different birth order. Are you the firstborn, the middle child? Are you one of 10? Are you an only child? Are you a twin? That factors into our background, right? We have different generations. Are you a Zoomer? Are you a millennial? Are you Generation X? Are you a baby boomer? There's divides over that right now, right? So we have different backgrounds, but notice that's a fourth level of human nature. We are unique. Every one of us is unique. What makes you, you, is your uniqueness. And we'll talk about this when we have a conversation about talent and your particular talent and how you could use your talent for the good. And then we have moods. We have different moods. Either we're seeking the good or we're not seeking the good at any given moment. And that can cause disunity too. You know, sometimes a person is just not in the mood to have a conversation. Let's say we're having a difficult conversation and their mood is just off. We can say, you know what, perhaps we should talk about this at another time when our moods are better. All right, so the last three examples I gave were to show rational presuppositionalism and its application. So we have an order in our thinking, there's an order in philosophy, there's an order in our being, and this method says we should deal with the more basic before we deal with the less basic. So deal with our human nature, which is the same, before we deal with our gender problems. we're disagreeing. Okay, and here's the hopeful part of this. If we agree on the more basic issues, we can agree on the less basic issues. And that's exciting, right? So there's the possibility of agreement. So if we agree on first level, perhaps we could take the next step and agree on the second level. If we don't, we should pause here, not go forward. Pause here until we can get agreement. And we should work it out. We should be willing to say, this is important enough that we should try. And if we're disagreeing, we can try to at least identify why and work on that. Now, I'm going to pause here because the next piece, the principle of clarity, is a little more involved, and I don't want to go too long in the video. So I'm going to make a part 2, and I will see you in the next video.